Ibrahim Traoré, the man who witnessed the horrors of Koa prison. In a world where power often becomes a tool for oppression, it is rare to see someone who seeks to understand the struggles of the powerless, not from a distance, but from within the very systems that hold them captive. This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, a man who took an unimaginable risk to expose the dark truths behind one of Burkina Faso's most notorious prisons. His decision to enter Koa prison under the guise of an ordinary inmate forever changed not only the course of his own life, but also the fate of the people within the prison walls. In his capacity as the transitional leader of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré was deeply aware of the widespread reports of corruption, abuse, and systemic failures within the country's prison system. Over the course of 3 months, government reports painted an image of a prison system that was supposedly improving. Conditions were better, the reports claimed, and the problems of the past were gradually being addressed. However, anonymous letters and whispers from human rights groups painted a different picture, one that suggested ongoing torture, starvation, unexplained deaths, and the unpunished abuse of prisoners. Traoré's decision to infiltrate Koa prison was not one made lightly. He knew that by doing so, he would place his life in grave danger. However, he also understood that without first-hand knowledge of the situation, he could not act effectively as a leader. His move was not about political theater or grandstanding, but about confronting the reality of human suffering in the most direct way possible. By disguising himself as an ordinary prisoner, he would experience the horrors of the prison firsthand. As Traoré made his way into Koa prison, the guards, the inmates, and even the warden did not recognize him. His appearance, disheveled, with stubbled cheeks, torn clothes, and a posture that betrayed no sign of authority, helped him blend in seamlessly with the other prisoners. The prison gates, made of thick iron, clanged open, and another prisoner was brought in. This was nothing unusual, not for the officers who worked the gates every day. But Traoré wasn't just any prisoner. Beneath his tattered clothing and worn-out appearance lay the most powerful man in the country. The prison he entered, Koa prison, was infamous. The gray concrete walls that surrounded it seemed to symbolize the hopelessness that reigned within. Those who had spent time in Koa described it as a place where laws no longer mattered, where corruption thrived, and where the very concept of justice was a cruel joke. The reports had been accurate, but it was Traoré's first step into the prison that solidified what many had long suspected. The prison was a place of torture, extortion, and unrelenting cruelty. Once inside the prison, Traoré's experience mirrored that of any other new arrival. He was assigned to cell block C7, the most feared section of the prison. The cell itself was small and filthy, with an old, stained mattress and a pillow that was harder than stone. The other prisoners eyed him with suspicion. To them, he was just another newcomer, potentially a threat, or perhaps someone who was merely passing through. The vast majority of prisoners in Koa were used to such faces, but none of them knew that the man sitting in their midst was the very leader of their nation. Despite the uncomfortable conditions, Traoré remained calm and observant. His presence in the prison was an undercover investigation, a fact that gave him a strange sense of purpose in the midst of his dire circumstances. The prisoners' reactions to him were varied. One man, Bari, was the most influential inmate in cell block C7. Bari had spent 15 years in Koa prison, and his crime was not just one of robbery or violence, it was the crime of being caught. To him, life in prison was a waiting game. There was no hope, no redemption, only the eventuality of death. As Traoré conversed with Bari, he realized just how ingrained the brutality of the prison system was. The prisoners, as they spoke, shared a grim understanding that survival was not about justice or rehabilitation. It was about staying alive in a system designed to break them down. And yet, the warden, the guards, and the political system turned a blind eye to the suffering of these individuals, perpetuating a system that left no room for hope. During the first night, the reality of Koa prison became even more apparent. As Traoré lay on his bunk, trying to settle into the grim routine of prison life, a disturbing sound echoed through the cell block. It was the weak moan of a young prisoner, Gaspar, who had been beaten by the guards. His body was covered in bruises, his ribs broken, and his condition was worsening by the day. The other prisoners knew what would happen next. The guards would do nothing. Gaspar's life was not worth saving because he had no money, no family to bribe the guards for treatment. In the harsh world of Koa, if you didn't have the means to survive, you didn't survive. The morning after, Traore witnessed the indifference of the guards as they carried Gaspar's lifeless body out of the cell. This routine death, another in a long line of deaths at Koa prison, was nothing to the guards. It was as though the prisoners were mere objects, discarded when no longer useful. But for Traore, it was the first shock, the first stark reminder of the brutality he was witnessing. One of the most shocking revelations for Traore during his time in Koa was the existence of a hidden economy, an economy based on bribes, extortion, and a complete disregard for human life. As he worked in the prison kitchen, Traore realized that the food served to the prisoners was nothing more than rotten vegetables and spoiled ingredients. The guards, on the other hand, were served fresh, high-quality meals. In Koa, the system was built on inequality. If you were a guard, you ate well. If you were a prisoner, you starved. Bari, the influential inmate, explained the dark truth of the prison's economy. Prisoners could bribe their way to better food, medicine, and even protection. If you didn't have money or family, you were left to rot. If you didn't bribe the guards, you were at their mercy. The system had become so corrupt that survival was no longer about obeying the rules. It was about making deals with the right people. This hidden economy was, in many ways, a microcosm of the larger societal issues facing Burkina Faso. It was a reflection of a government that allowed corruption to flourish, a society that ignored the suffering of its most vulnerable members, and a system that prioritized power and money over human dignity. The most horrifying aspect of Koa prison, however, was the special room. Bari had warned Traore about it. The room where prisoners were taken and never returned, or if they did return, they were broken, physically and mentally. The room was equipped with electric shock devices and other tools of torture. The guards used it to extort money from prisoners' families, and if the families couldn't pay, the prisoners were subjected to unspeakable horrors. One night, as Traore lay in his cell, he heard the unmistakable sound of a prisoner being dragged to the special room. The prisoner, a young man with no family to speak of, had been tortured for not having the money to pay the bribes demanded by the guards. The screams that emanated from that room were enough to shake anyone to their core, and for Traore, it was a painful confirmation of the nightmare that Koa prison had become. On the fourth day of his undercover mission, Traore was called to the special room. The guards, having realized that he had been asking too many questions, decided to teach him a lesson. As he was dragged into the room, Traore realized that his time in Koa was coming to an end. But he wasn't going to let the guards break him. Instead, he had a plan, one that would change the course of the entire prison system. As the guards prepared to torture him, Traore revealed his true identity. He pulled out a small plastic transmitter, a device given to him by the Secret Service. With a calm voice, he activated it. "I'm calling for help," he said, his words steady and unwavering. The response was immediate. Special forces, armed and masked, stormed into the room, and Traore's loyal guards surrounded him. The warden, who had no idea who he was truly dealing with, was left in shock. In a single moment, the power dynamic in the prison shifted. The once untouchable warden, who had presided over countless abuses, was now at the mercy of the very man he had sought to exploit. As the warden was taken into custody, Traore's calm demeanor was replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. The leader of Burkina Faso was no longer hiding in the shadows. He was a man of action, a man who had seen the horrors of his country's prison system firsthand, and who was determined to make things right. The fall of Warden Kabore marked the beginning of a new chapter for Koa prison and for Burkina Faso. Traore, now publicly revealed as the country's leader, ordered the closure of Koa prison. The prison, which had been a symbol of abuse and corruption, would be dismantled. In its place, a rehabilitation center would be built, a place where prisoners would be treated with dignity and respect. Under Traore's leadership, the transformation of Koa prison began. The walls were torn down, and the barbed wire that had once kept the prisoners trapped in a cycle of despair was removed. What was once a center of torture and death became a symbol of hope and renewal. Inmates were given access to healthcare, education, and food. The hidden economy of bribes and extortion was eradicated, and the guards who had participated in the abuses were brought to justice. When Ibrahim Traoré visited the former inmates of Koa prison, he did so not as a leader in a suit, but as a man who had stood alongside them in their suffering. He had experienced their pain, and he had fought for their rights. The former prisoners, who had once lived in fear, now saw a leader who had not only fought for their freedom, but had also shown them the true meaning of leadership. Traoré's message was clear. Real power lies in protecting the weak, and real leadership is about feeling the pain of your people. This transformation in Koa prison was not just about reforming an institution. It was about reshaping the future of Burkina Faso. It was a symbol of a new era, one where justice and human dignity were paramount. Through Traoré's actions, the nation began its journey from darkness to light, from oppression to freedom. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is one of courage, resilience, and transformation. It is a reminder that true leadership is not about holding power over others, but about using that power to lift them up. As Burkina Faso moves forward, Traoré's legacy will be one of hope, justice, and the unshakable belief that a nation is only as strong as its most vulnerable members. The fall of Koa prison and the rise of a new era in Burkina Faso is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of a leader who never forgot his roots. Traoré's journey is far from over, but the impact of his actions will echo throughout the history of Burkina Faso and beyond for generations to come.